As I said, I'm Deborah Wymore, co-president of the Woodlands Green with Paul Nelson. We've got John Geiger kind of behind the scenes helping on technology tonight. And he is the manager of environmental services that we coordinate with on a daily, weekly basis for projects like Rain Barrels and many other projects. Thank you so much for being online tonight. We're edging into the holiday weekend. I was at the airport last night, and you would think, what pandemic other than people wearing masks, thankfully. But it is feeling somewhat back to normal. And certainly with the holiday traffic, I was pretty amazed. Been to the airport during the pandemic. I went overseas last fall, and there was very few bodies in the terminals, but that has certainly changed. Anyway, this lecture series we've had for quite a while. I'm thinking at least a decade now. Paul Nelson is our leader, and he works closely with the different lecturers in coming up with 9 to 10 different lectures throughout the year. We have been Zoom for the last year, and that's actually gone over pretty well. We're going to study it pretty closely to see if we're going to go Zoom or some in person and some Zoom next year. But the pandemic has taught us many things, and one thing, people like lectures and to view them from their homes, and that has worked out pretty well for everyone. Coming up is the next Going Green lecture, and the last one for the year is going to be coming up with our annual meeting next month. On June the 7th, I invite everyone. It's our wrap up. It's a celebration. We have many things to announce, including our scholarship winners, village challenges winners. We make library donations at that time. And the second part of the meeting on June the 7th is on a climate simulation tool, which is a Going Green lecture with Roger Ingersoll, going to provide that next month. So put that on your calendar. There will be a Zoom link on the website, just like tonight was. And it's 7 o'clock, and the climate lecture should start around 7:45, 8 o'clock. So tune into that. I think we're ready to go ahead and get started with Bill. Let me give you a little bit of background. Bill is a Woodlands Green member, and we so appreciate you for being a member with us, as well as a board member of the Bayou Land Conservancy. He is a professional photographer, as you will well see tonight. It's going to be a real treat to see all the photography that Bill has taken, longtime resident of the Woodlands. Also he is a geospatial technologist. And Bill, I had to look up what that meant. Maybe you'll describe it a bit, but it's a very interesting career path that you have, as well as a professional photography. Trained or educated, bachelor's degree Arizona State and a master's degree Texas State. And we welcome Bill this evening. I think you'll really enjoy all the pictures he's taken, especially of our Spring Creek Nature Trail. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Bill, and we're going to get our slide shares going here shortly. I think John's going to help with the transition. Before I leave you, be sure to put your chat questions. I will try and keep up with those, and when we have time to go over your questions, we'll, I'll be reviewing that. So use chat, please go ahead.
Okay, I can go and share my screen now. All right, can you see my screen, Deborah?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Good.
All right, well, great. Well, thank you very much for that introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone here tonight just about some of the photography work I've been doing with the Spring Creek Nature Trail and my involvement with Bayou Land Conservancy as a board member and trail steward volunteer, and everything I kind of do with my love of getting out there and working with nature and working with Bayou Land Conservancy it's all very directly related to my work in geospatial technologies as a geographer, understanding what's happening with our natural environments and how things are changing and the impacts on our ecosystems and how that gets balanced with, the need to provide, places for people to live and work and so forth. So it's a very, in Texas, it's a very complex relationship because I grew up in Houston. I grew up down the coast. As a kid, I remember traveling up and down the intercoastal waterway, and not only is it a beautiful place from an ecological standpoint, but it's a really vital economic engine. People don't realize how much goes up and down the intercoastal waterway, and through the different ports and things, and finds its way all over the world. So when I started photographing the Spring Creek Nature Trail, I started doing this a little over 2 years ago as we started developing the trail. Bayou Conservancy got a approval, worked with the township and Harris County Precinct 4 and Montgomery County precincts and some other and Hughes Development, and started staking out the trail, and they did a big archaeological study and really kind of try to figure out where this trail was going to go, how long it was going to be. And so with this, I want to kind of cover a little bit about the history of the Spring Creek Greenway, which is a much bigger ecosystem, and the trail is just one little piece of it around the Woodlands area. And I just want to share a little bit of what I've photographed and what we've come across, and I hope you'll find the presentation informative. I hope you'll be eager to try to get out there and explore some or all parts of the trail yourself. At 14 miles long, it's more than a day's hike, so it's a long day hike if you want to try to do it all in one day. But as the end, just feel free to post your questions as Deborah mentioned, and we'll be glad to stay on as long as possible and answer any other questions people have. So in conservation photography, for those of you that like to follow National Geographic or other types of, really wonderful wildlife, nature photographers out there, Joel Sartori is one of the most interesting people that I kind of follow. He's the founder of something called the Photo Arc. He's a National Geographic photographer, and he made this kind of funny comment one time. He said, your typical nature photography shows a butterfly on a pretty flower, but conservation photography shows the same butterfly with the bulldozer coming out in the background. And that's a little bit, it's a little more simplistic, but it's kind of true. You're out there trying to show some really interesting things in nature, but you're also trying to tell a story about why that is important. Why should people care about that butterfly on the flower? Maybe it's a really important riparian area, or an area with a lot of wildflowers that helps, flood mitigation and so forth. So, my interest in conservation photography is really taking photos of landscapes and nature and wildlife and so forth, but trying to kind of put it together into a story, share that with other people, get them, excited about it, get, if they want to get involved, try to help people get involved. There's so many, when people think of Houston and they're not from this area, so many times they think Houston's just an industrial landscape. There's nothing natural about it. There's nothing green. There's nothing ecological. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. We have so many great ecological treasures in areas around the region. And there's so much history there. And there's so much to be involved in as well, in the Houston region. When you think about all the different nonprofits and groups that are really on the front lines of basically trying to help preserve these lands and work with private landowners to protect something that's been in their families maybe for centuries, and so it's a really important aspect of our region. So as a geographer though, I work a lot with data and look at land cover change and ecological, work with other researchers on ecological change, and so when you're looking at this data, you're seeing these things in numbers, and you're seeing things in graphs and maps and so forth. But getting out there in the field, it kind of lets you see what we have. And sometimes you photograph things and come back and they're not there anymore. So and that's important to try to capture that too as well, to try to document some of that history of what we have today, because there's not always a guarantee it'll be there in the future. So one of the things from when you look at areas around the coast, as I mentioned, I grew up down in the Clear Lake area in Galveston Bay. I did sailing and fishing and, up and down the coastal areas, boating with my family down the intercoastal waterways. I really got to experience the Gulf Coast, many years ago. And our region of the coast is really got a lot of industry to it. It's a major economic driver, and that just provides a lot of challenges for us. How do we, balance all those, and how do we provide opportunities for people? How do we help protect people's properties from flooding? There's a lot of different issues that land conservation really centers around, and so that's something that I've always been passionate about, and that's why I volunteer my time with an organization like Bayou Conservancy. So the Spring Creek Greenway, this is a map, a generalized map. This is on Harris County Precinct 4's website. And you can kind of see in the upper left area is kind of more where the Woodlands is. You can see the Hardy Toll Road, I-45 interconnection there. But it's the Spring Creek Greenway is one of the best kept secrets of our region. It's roughly 30 miles long, 12,000 acres. It's the longest contiguous urban forested greenway in America. Its conservation efforts began back in the mid-1970s, and they continue on today. At one time, there was a lot of risk of it being overdeveloped, but we can thank a lot of people early on who had the foresight and the vision to try to preserve and work on that. Some of those folks, those early pioneers in helping the conservation efforts were Harris County Judge John Lindsay and Judy Overby Bell, and they worked to acquire and find a lot of land that was donated and put that into conservation areas, or keep them into a floodplain area and keeping people out of those floodplains. So that was a really important start to that. In the early 2000s, though, Montgomery County Commissioner Ed Chance signed an agreement to permanently set aside with Bayou Land Conservancy and mitigate some land for the floodway and the floodplain. And throughout the years, conservation efforts have been aided by private landowners such as Rice University, Misher Development, the Woodlands Development Corporation, Hughes Development, and what was once Humble Oil. This area really has a rich Native American history. As a kid growing up, I remember we were all, basically required to take Texas history, right? And you learned all about the different, the original people of this area. And when we were, working on the trail, they were doing an archaeological study, and if you ever visit the Jesse Jones Nature Center, you can actually see that there's some artifacts on display there from this particular area. So they do a great job of communicating that history. So the Greenway basically stretches, from east near Tomball all the way over to the west near 59. And one of the questions people have is, well, do the paved trails on the Harris County side interact with the nature trail? And no, they don't. And it's intended that way because we want the nature trail to be really an immersive experience in nature, not in a built environment in any way. So they are completely separate kind of pathways and trails. So in fact, if you're out on the Spring Creek Greenway, you might actually, there's a lot of really old growth forest and trees there. You actually might be seeing trees that Native Americans and Spanish French explorers experienced hundreds of years ago. Some of these cypress trees are hundreds of years old. They're several feet in diameter. In many places around the country, old growth trees have been removed and replaced by newer species, sometimes non-native species. And those invasive species trees are not good for the ecosystems. On the Spring Creek Greenway, you have the opportunity to see a lot of this native vegetation as it really was originally. And this is just a photograph of an area, a small creek area that kind of peels off of the Spring Creek, the major Spring Creek area, and it's a riparian area with a lot of palmettos and other native trees. The Spring Creek Greenway is really a critical bottomland forest and wetland habitat. You can see gray foxes, bobcats, bald eagles, lots of different coastal birds year round. And we've got our migratory birds that come through, beavers. I'll talk about that a little bit more, about some of the ones we have right here in the Woodlands along the nature trail, and just really centuries old bald cypress trees. In this photograph, this is an American alligator, and And this was in one of the water areas along Spring Creek. And they pretty much, this alligator, we saw it was really just kind of a flash. We saw it kind of splash off of a log into the lake, and shortly after that, it just kind of disappeared. So a lot of these, you definitely always want to take precautions when you're out in nature, and respect nature, respect other animals. Don't try to intimidate them, and they want to be left alone, just like you want to be left alone. So, but these provide really great opportunities for people to see a lot of these different species from afar. Many of these species that were once considered almost on the brink of extinction. Some of the birds that are really common, in these wetland areas are like the white ibis shown in this picture here. They're an interesting bird. They like to skim small items off the bottom of these really shallow lakes and ponds. These habitats have just a variety of food in them. Certain species, go after the bigger fish and frogs and lizards and things like that, like the herons. But a lot of these other species, like the roseate spoonbills and the ibis, all day long, they're just skimming in the shallows, looking for small little bits and pieces that they find in the sand. So these habitats are really critical for providing a lot of food sources for our resident birds as well as our migratory birds. Here's a photo of same area, but this is a great egret. In the background, you've got the white ibis feeding in the wetland area. These are coastal birds, and you can see them year round. It's really, most people think, well, coastal birds, they must be closer to the beaches and the shores, but these birds come quite a ways inland, so you can really get an idea of what different types of species that you would normally see along some of our areas like Resortia Wildlife Refuge or areas. You'll see a lot of those same species even as far inland as where we are in the woodlands. So the importance of our general region and really the whole Texas Gulf Coast, for birds, if you're really into birding, and is that when you look at the Houston Galveston region with bird migrations, it's very important because we get over 400 bird species can be found in our Houston Gulf area, with over 250 million migratory birds coming through annually. Some travel nonstop for more than 15 hours straight across the Caribbean and the Gulf. When they get here, they are exhausted, they're hungry, they're thirsty, they need a habitat to rest and refuel. And if they don't find that, it's not going to be easy for them to survive. And many of them have, further distances to go. So it's the first stopover for them on their long migrations every year. And so these ecosystems are really important for us to preserve and protect and provide these habitats. And this map here, this is from Houston Audubon. It's a really great map. It kind of shows these areas that the stopover importance. Those really bright areas represent areas where they're able to detect all these birds coming through. You can use radar, other types of data, and you can pick up these large flocks of birds coming into this area, and you can see where they're coming into. And so all along the Texas Gulf Coast is, especially the Houston Galveston region. If you've ever been down to High Island during the peak of migratory season, it's just amazing to see all the species down there. So our region is really important. Without our region, it'd be a real challenge for these migratory birds to really make these long trips. So as I mentioned, I do a lot of work with geography, and I've been very involved in looking at land cover change. And if you look at our this is our 8-county region around Harris County, and that shaded area there represents the Spring Creek watershed, and that's the area of land that drains into Spring Creek, which then kind of flows into the San Jacinto and then down through Lake Houston and out through the ship channel into Galveston Bay. And what I'm going to go through here and talk a little bit about is get away from the pictures for a minute and talk a little bit about some of the changes we've seen in our landscapes in this area, and kind of bring home the importance for conservation efforts that so many organizations are involved in. This whole network, you can see the light kind of blue lines. Those are all the major stream networks in our area, but there's many other smaller ones that branch off of there. And so you can see where we are in relation to this entire region. And if you're not familiar with how a watershed works, as I mentioned, if you look at Spring Creek there, right in the middle of that shaded area, you think of when a drop of rain falls and if it runs off, where's it going to go? And you've got really large watersheds like Spring Creek, and those break down into smaller watersheds, and so they all kind of nest inside. And of course, Spring Creek is a part of much bigger water basins. And so what happens there is that it's very important both in terms of understanding flooding, but also where water in terms of water quality. So if you have a lot of impervious cover, you've got a lot of pollution or other things that are running off, fertilizer, all those things are heading into those waterways. We don't have a system where our stormwaters go into any kind of a sewage treatment plant. I mean, our stormwaters, they come down our streets, they run across our land, they go into the nearest natural creek or bayou. and pretty much for our region, it pretty much all dumps into Galveston Bay. And back during Harvey, Galveston Bay probably got down as close to a freshwater lake as you could ever get to with the amount of water that came through there. This right here is a map that shows what we call impervious cover. So the pink just kind of represents, this is satellite-based imagery looking at, areas on a 30 by 30 meter grid scale, if it picks up high, medium, or low density in terms of impervious cover. And impervious cover, for the most part, you can think of concrete, you can think of anything that's not a natural surface. Sometimes impervious cover will also pick up really hard, compacted grounds, but for the most part, what you're looking at here is a lot of developed space. And when you look at this, basically what you have here is, this is in 2001 with the Spring Creek watershed outlined in purple there. This is in 2016. So what you can see there is again, this is a view of developed areas in the light gray. So that would be considered something that would be like homes or businesses, not necessarily impervious cover, but just considered developed. It's not natural space. And that goes back to 1996, and you fast forward to 2016, 20 years later. And we have some newer data for 2020 we just received from NOAA. So the trend kind of continues for the region. If you kind of zoom in a little closer, you can see the Spring Creek area. You can see the Woodlands there, kind of in the upper right corner of the Spring Creek watershed near the Montgomery label. That's impervious cover in 2001. This is in 2016. And the same thing for developed areas between 1996 and 2016. So you see those trends, and this is another view kind of looking at what we call forested areas in green in 1996 versus 2016. You can see quite a bit of forest loss, mainly from development, areas being clear cut and native, pines or other evergreens or other trees being removed. And then wetland areas aren't as dramatic when you look at the change. But in 1996, if you kind of look to the right area of Spring Creek there, you can start to see quite a few wetlands. Kind of go back and forth there. You can kind of see little pockets. And a lot of times when we lose wetlands, they're not always big, huge wetlands. Sometimes it's an acre or two here or there, and it really adds up because the wetlands are what store a lot of these floodwaters. They also provide a lot of habitats, and when they're removed, or filled in, or they don't have that carrying capacity for water anymore, and that water's got to go somewhere, which means it usually runs off and drains into the nearest bayou or ditch, and it goes downstream, and many times it can become somebody else's problem. This is a graph showing those changes over time. So the black line represents the change of the impervious cover over time, and the red line represents the developed areas, and the blue and the green represent the forested wetlands. And you can see that just the percent changes. You've got 30%, 32% increases in impervious cover in developed areas. Roughly 127,000 acres and 303,000 acres just for Harris County and the surrounding counties. And you've had about 22% decrease in forest and wetlands total. And when you think about what an acre foot can store, that's about 325,000 gallons of water. That's more than any rain barrel anybody has. So if you've got an acre of forested wetland and you get the rain like we've had in the past week, that 325,000 gallons is really important. And something to keep in mind is that a mature tree can take up and store 100 gallons of water per day. So if you look at some of these areas that you might be losing a few hundred trees or more, that starts to add up in terms of the amount of gallons, not just maybe that are being stored in the forested wetland area, but also water that is no longer going to be taken up through kind of a green infrastructure or other types of vegetation. Globally, one of the things why conservation and a lot of people are really involved in telling these stories around the world is that this is just a trend that we've seen, globally. Latin America and the Caribbean has seen drastic drops in the amount of, biodiversity in terms of species. Africa the same way, Asia Pacific, North America and Europe. Everything is kind of in a downward trend since really this began, and people really started tracking a lot of this detail back in the early 70s. So there's a lot of needs and a lot of efforts to really try to work on these issues and find balance to them over time. So the Spring Creek Nature Trail, I'm going to kind of go from the macro of the Greenway in our region and get really into the Spring Creek Nature Trail again. So this is a map of the trail. We have basically when you look at the far western trailhead, the Creekside Park West Trailhead, that's at the parking lot by Dr. Ann Schneider Way, down there off Creekside Forest Drive. There's actually the Burroughs Park Connector, which is a new section of the trail that goes a little bit further to the west. It's a really beautiful section of trail to go walk. I really encourage you to go walk that. From the star there, you see at the parking location, as you walk around and go through the Woodlands Bridge area, you can actually, there's been so much traffic that there's actually a loop that goes, it's not really officially part of the trail, but I'll just kind of draw on the screen here if I can. But, really from about right here all the way back, you can walk on this side of the lake and do a nice little, 1.5 mile loop. It's a very non-technical kind of section of the trail, meaning that you don't, it doesn't get real muddy or super sandy. It's for the most part, it's fairly compacted and similar to what you would kind of see in that picture where the two mountain bikers are. Not difficult to walk at all, not difficult to ride your bike on at all. Once you get into the trail more, once you get into these parts of the trail, over here and further, the trail narrows a little bit more. It goes through the forested areas. You'll get when rain like we've had recently, it's definitely going to be a little bit more muddy. So always keep that in mind. A little bit more sandy in certain places, but it's a beautiful area. And all along the trail, we have these bridges named after various different people, many of them volunteers that help build this trail and build the bridges. Every bridge you see on the trail, with the exception of the Spring Creek Bridge, which is that large metal bridge behind the old YMCA there at Creekside, every single wooden bridge you come across or boardwalk, that was all built by volunteers for the trail crew. So when you're out there and you're seeing this trail, no one is paid to maintain this trail. No state agency came in and built it or paid contractors. This was all completely built by volunteers. And really the purpose of this trail is that it allows us to really give people access to nature. And in a society where we're surrounded by technology, especially kids, we see anxieties on the rise, depressions on the rise. With people being locked down the past year, we saw a huge increase in the number of people using the Spring Creek Nature Trail. Just getting outdoors in a manner that they felt safe, that they could be distanced from other people that not are in their family, and being able to give them a way to go relax and restore and really just enjoy the outdoors in a non-intimidating way. In a recent study, they discovered that after someone has a green outdoor walk, in nature, 92% of participants felt less depressed, 86% were less tense, 81% were less angry, which is good, 80% less fatigued, and 79% less confused, and 56% felt more vigorous, even though they went on a nice walk. This is basically, kind of why everybody really has really been behind building this trail, is to be able to give this type of access to those, and not just in the Woodlands, but anybody that wants to come up to this area and be able to experience the trail. There's a variety of partners that have contributed to this project in addition to volunteers: Harris County Flood Control District, REI, the Greater Houston Off-Road Bike Association, GORBA, Repsol Foundation, Texas Parks and Wildlife, Smith Foundation, Harris County Precinct 4 and Montgomery County Precinct 3, and of course the Woodlands Township and Hughes Development have all been great partners in making this trail a reality. The major access points, other than the Creekside Park location, is you can also get to it from the George Mitchell Preserve off Flint Ridge. You can basically take the fitness loop all the way to the back, and the trail kind of shares the southern section of the fitness loop there, and then continues on. You can get to it from the Creekside, the Rob Fleming Recreation Center, also known as the old YMCA Creekside. And then we have another trailhead way over by the Montgomery County Preserve. There is a bridge here that we were using that's privately owned by an oil and gas firm with a functioning well back in this area. And so, one thing that we just say here is that that bridge is typically closed. So if you think you're going to go hike the whole thing, right now that's really not possible. So keep that in mind. And if you start from the easternmost preserve trailhead, you'll get about a mile or so before you probably experience that bridge and might have to turn back. So that's kind of an unfortunate thing, but we're trying to work through some of those issues with the private landowner and try to come to resolutions on that. So a downloadable version of this map, you can find that by going to BayouLandConservancy.org, that link at the bottom, and you can download a PDF of the map, take a copy with you. And if you're interested in getting involved at all, you can reach out to Bayou Land Conservancy, join their newsletter, become a donor, get involved. There's lots of great opportunities to get involved with this project. We also have something on the trail called what it's called Travel Stories. And if you've ever traveled around the nation, it's an app you can download on your phone or Google device. And they have these little narrated maps using the location of your phone. And we have a couple different sections along the trail. If you see like a post, this is one of the signposts that's on the trail. These are throughout the trail. There's a QR code there that the township created. If you scan that with your phone, it'll pull up an interactive map and kind of show you where you are. If you see the badge for the story here, that means that section of the trail is part of the narrated travel stories. And I encourage you to check that out. It's a nice little way to get a bit of a narration and a guided tour on certain sections of the trail, talk about its importance based on where you are and some of the history behind the trail. The trail offers lots of opportunities. It's hikers, trail runners, nature lovers, birders, bikers, people who want to go for a walk. The motorized vehicles are not permitted on the trail, and that's by design. So far, it's been pretty much non-motorized vehicles. It's as I mentioned earlier, it's mainly built by volunteers in partnership with local government and private landowners. So it's just a really great experience to get out there and do lots of different opportunities. You see there, one of the pictures in the bottom right there, we've had a couple of great years for fall color. Our fall is a little bit later sometimes in November, sometimes closer to Thanksgiving. But we've had a couple of really wonderful years of some, if the weather's just right, the leaves turning and really getting some great color, which we all know in Texas, that fall color is really fleeting. It's here one day and it's gone the next. And so it's always a good time to go out there in the late fall when you start to see those leaves change in your neighborhoods, and you'll see some wonderful landscapes. So the trail, this is a couple of our trail crew volunteers. They're always out there on the trail, working on bridges, repairing them. Here they're actually putting in a dedication plank. Bayou Land Conservancy has a program that allows you to purchase a plank or something on the trail, maybe in commemoration of somebody, or maybe you and your family want to support the trail in some way. There's information on Bayou Land Conservancy's website about that program. But since the trail opened in June of 2018, volunteers have put in well over 3,000 hours of volunteer work. That's not paid work, that's volunteer work. These are people that are out there. The trail crew is typically out there almost every Wednesday. They're always, they're maintaining vegetation. They are, making repairs to bridges. They're sometimes having to reroute sections of the trail. So if you ever see anybody out there in these green shirts that say trail crew, or you see just a bunch of people together looking like they're doing something with trimming vegetation, they're probably the trail crew. And just say thank you, because volunteers like them is what makes it all possible. So here on the western part of the trail, in that map I showed you, there's three really large areas that typically have a good amount of water in them. I'm sure they're really full right now with the rain we've had. Even in the driest parts of the year, they'll get really low, but they typically have water in them. And it's a really great way to go see a lot of the birding, the bird populations in the area. They like those shallow lakes. In the winter times, you might even see some of the large white pelicans that migrate through the area. They typically like these really shallow lakes, and so those lakes over on the western part of the trail that you can get to from the parking lot off Dr. Ann Schneider Drive are really a great way to kind of do that little loop around the lakes and see lots of different bird species and just have a nice walk. This is the easternmost part of the trail over in the Montgomery County Preserve off Beauty Road. This is near the baseball fields and the recycling center over there. It's a very well marked entrance. So it's a nice little place to walk. You go about a mile or so before you hit that private bridge that I mentioned. And it's a nice wooded walk as well, which in the summertime is nice. I do recommend when we get into those seasons with mosquitoes is bug spray is always a good thing. So don't forget your bug spray and a good hat and maybe even a long sleeve shirt if you're worried about sun or anything. So one of the ecological features you see along the trail a lot in these particular areas with the water is the wetlands, and these offer a lot of natural retention benefits. They help with flood mitigation. They help improve our water quality. They filter out a lot of pollutants. They also offer critical habitat for lots of different species, not just birds, but other animals. And in this example here, got a natural vegetation providing a nice flood water retention and water quality benefits. In wetlands, sometimes if you're walking around, you might see what looks kind of like an oil slick on top of the water, and although this might actually be some pollutants, really what it is it's probably more of like an anaerobic microbes breaking down plant material beneath the surface in the wetlands. So you might even see bubbles coming up from the bottom, and that's all good. That's all part of the natural process. And this is an example of one of the areas that we were kind of seeing that happen. This is an example of this is probably what this section of the lake over there on the western part looks like today with the rain. This was taken a couple years ago after another major rainfall, and you can really see the amount of water that's coming down through just a small tributary off of Spring Creek into these lakes. And so they're really instrumental in helping us to slow down that rainfall versus just sending it downstream and accumulating in other areas and causing flooding problems. Yeah, and so as I mentioned, these are some examples. This past fall and the year before, we really had some really great fall color out there on the trail in November. So keep your eye on that, and I think you'll really enjoy a nice fall walk in Texas. This is a picture in the fall again. This is a great egret out there in one of the small lakes. You can really see the nice fall color around them. One section of the trail, and you really won't see much of this anymore. It's been a little bit picked over, but one section of the trail we call China Hill. And, there's a lot of different theories about how all this mid 1950s China got there. But pretty much we think at the end, it kind of came down to, it was dumped by someone cleaning out old restaurants in the area. And there's a lot of these little pieces of mid-century China that were buried there. There's still a couple little mounds and little pieces here and there, but a lot of the full pieces we came across have long been picked over by people. So some interesting things. And we've got people that get into geocaching out there. This is a geocache someone built on the trail, and they get quite creative. We're always seeing new ones pop up here and there. So it's nice to see everybody getting out and getting outdoors and exploring the trail area. So the beaver pond is probably my favorite place on the trail. It's an area about 2 miles in from the parking lot, about maybe half a mile or so from Kirkendall, and this is an actual beaver pond. It's beavers are really the engineers in our nature. They provide valuable services to ecosystems. Just as forests pull a lot of carbon from the atmosphere and sequester it in its wood, beaver ponds lock up a lot of carbon in their buried sediment. These beaver ponds also help with mitigating runoff and with flood mitigation because they capture a lot of water. And over time, they just allow for that rainfall to collect, slowly release itself over time. This is an actual picture of the lodge right there on the beaver trail. There's actually a loop that goes around the beaver trail now. We finished the loop. So these are a little bit different lodges than what you might think of when you think of like beavers you might see pictures of in Yellowstone or other places. They all throughout underneath this lodge here, they have subterranean networks. And in fact, we've kind of had to go through certain sections of the trail and put some boardwalks in because, holes have started to pop up where they were kind of rooting underneath it. But the beavers, today beavers aren't at risk of extinction, but at one time in America, they estimate a pretty broad range of anywhere between 60 million to 400 million beavers were found within North America. Way back by the turn of the 20th century, trappers had reduced their numbers a great deal, but today that we think that maybe some estimates have beaver populations in the North America area around 15 million. So they're not endangered by any means, but they provide really valuable ecosystem services. So I'm going to play a little video here for a couple minutes. This is going to give you a little idea of a project we've been working on with the beaver pond. We wanted to try to, beavers are, they aren't out during the daytime a lot. And a lot of times, really only, get pictures of them or anything like that is maybe early in the morning or late at night. But in this video, myself and Suzanne Simpson, who's with Bayou Conservancy, we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of the beaver pond. And there's some images we've captured to share. And so I'm going to play this. This video runs for about 2 minutes.
Tree routes through little thicket jungle.
Oh, okay.
But they're not bad. It's nothing. In a way, I'm kind of glad we did the job.
Hey, this is Suzanne Simpson. I'm the Land Stewardship Director for Bayou Land Conservancy. Today I'm coming to you from Beaver Pond on the Spring Creek Nature Trail. It is my all-time favorite site on the trail, and a big reason is this pile that's in front of me. It's a beaver dam. Beavers are our most prolific ecosystem engineers other than humans. They're responsible for the creation and maintenance of a lot of really important wetland habitat like the pond we have here. So we're going to do a little project to try and get an inside look at the beaver's life here at Beaver Pond. Bill's going to tell you a little bit more about it.
Hi, I'm Bill Bass. I'm a board member with Bayou Land Conservancy and Trail Steward member. And as what we're working on today is a project to try to get a little more inside information on the beavers here at the Beaver Pond. As you see right here, we have a game cam set up. The idea of the game cam is there's a motion sensor and a lens and also an infrared flash. The idea is that anything that comes across this area will trigger the motion sensor, capture a couple of images, and then hopefully get some video that's set up to both film daytime and nighttime. And we're really hoping to learn a little bit more about what's going on here at this Beaver Lodge.
Okay, so from that video, you can see that there's a lot more that goes on around the beaver lodge than just the beavers. We saw lots of coyotes coming around that area. One day I caught the tail end of that bobcat, which was really exciting. I wish you would have been in the picture a little bit more, but I'll take what I can get. There were deer around there, lots of different birds. So it's really kind of a central focal point. We've seen, I've seen some foxes around there as well. So it's a really important part of the trail. The beaver pond also is just a great place to see lots of different birds as well on that pond. As photographing, you just don't ever really know what you're going to get when you go out to photograph. Sometimes you come home with nothing, and sometimes you come home with something where nature cooperates really well. And one day I was out there, and this flock of black-bellied whistling ducks, they were on the pond and they were kind of fighting over food. And then all of a sudden they all just got together on this branch and lined up, and all with the exception of a couple of them on there, they all pretty much cooperated and stayed still for about a minute, and then I got a good picture and they took off. So you never really quite know what you'll get, but there's a lot of interesting things to see out there on the trail. These are black-bellied whistling ducks. Once again, we had done on the trail, thanks to our partner REI, we completed a full loop around the beaver pond. So off the main trail, you can do a full loop, and there's a really nice new bridge that REI sponsored, and we put that in and had their slogan there. A life outdoors is a life well lived. So we really appreciate everybody who tried to help make this possible, around the trail. And there's just a lot of great opportunities. Beaver Pond, if you like to get out and take pictures of reflections, I mean, there's a certain days where, all the lily pads have parted, the water's like glass, and you get some really beautiful reflections. And so it's a really nice place to go and walk around. So the bridges I mentioned, we have well over 25 bridges now on the Spring Creek Nature Trail. Some of them are rather small, some of them are pretty big. But these are all built by volunteers. The lumber was pulled in and it was all built by hand using just ATVs to pull in some large beams. These aren't flimsy structures, they're pretty solid, and they're well engineered. A couple of the bridges are pretty much 30 feet long. In this picture, this is East Bridge. This is just to the west of Gosling, kind of halfway between Gosling and the George Mitchell Preserve off Flint Ridge. It's a really beautiful bridge that was built there. And we engrave all the bridges with the names of the bridges. This is Bob's Boardwalk, named after one of our trail crew members who led the bridge building volunteer efforts. And this is Peter's Path over on the more of the eastern part of the trail. And Caney's Crossing was one of the biggest bridges we built early on. And we had a lot of different volunteers come out one day. They worked on this for a couple of days to get the footers in and the beams in, and then one day everybody came together and we pretty much finished up the bridge. Really the volunteers behind putting all those bridges in. This is a picture of John Stacy, who leads our trail crews, and he's out there every Wednesday. And they're working on repairing these bridges and putting in new bridges and diverting the trail when they need to. Here's an idea of this is Caney's Crossing. This is an idea of kind of what goes underneath that bridge with the beams. They're no small task, and so it's quite an effort to put these bridges together. And that's kind of as Caney's Crossing was being finished, and then that was named after one of our volunteers on the trail crew. And what I'm going to do right now is just switch over and show a brief video on what went into developing the Caney's Crossing Bridge. This is a video Suzanne Simpson put together with Bayou Conservancy. We went out there one day. I set up a time-lapse camera. We're
building a bridge, and we're hauling in all of our wood supplies for the bridge that's going over Caney's Crossing that will connect the lakeside for the Spring Creek Nature Trail. So we're using a couple of ATVs to haul in all of our supplies. In fact, the stringers that we're using, we have about 3 of them, they're 600 pounds each. So we've just hauled in the first one, and that was successful, which is good. A lot of hairpin turns to go through here, and we're going to be heading back to bring in the other 2 and the rest of the supplies that we have. Caney's Crossing is about 26 feet. That's the length of the Springer. But of course, we'll have the footers on each side, and it will extend a little bit further on each side to make sure that we can have full access for bikers and hikers. While it might be warm and humid out here today, it's a good time. We're in a shaded area. We'll have it completed, so there'll be more opportunity for the people that are coming out in the fall, and what better time to do it. We began the work last year during the same time period, and it was a successful stretch of work that we did.
These big footers over to the other side of that big creek. So what we're going to do is put boards down on the far side of the bank, hook a cable to this big giant piece of timber, drag it down into the creek where it'll hit the boards and it'll pull it up in an angle to the other side. That's how we get the 600-pound boards across the creek.
The Bayou Conservancy Trail Crew is a group of volunteers that have come together from a wide variety of backgrounds, and cumulatively they've put in over 2,500 hours of volunteer service into making the Spring Creek Nature Trail a reality.
I first was approached by my son, who is a very avid outdoors person here in the Woodlands, and he said, "Hey Dad, you want to go through the ambassador program?" And I said, "Sure." And so we embarked upon that. And it was really an interesting experience. And then I kept hearing about what people referred to as the Geezer Squad, which is basically, I guess, older guys and gals that decide to volunteer. Sounded really interesting because I enjoy getting out and physical activity. And that led me to a Wednesday morning session every week with these guys coming out and building bridges and clearing paths. And it's just fantastic experience because there's so much enjoyment and fulfillment of seeing the path and a trail or build a bridge and that you were involved in, and it gives you a sense of ownership in the community. Plus, we're providing great opportunities for the people who live here. My brother, my older brother, has been a long-time volunteer, and a couple of friends that I worked with were telling me about their volunteer experience, and so I decided that that's something that I wanted to do to give back.
Caney's Crossing isn't the only bridge that we've had to build on the Spring Creek Nature Trail. In fact, we've had 18 structures that have been put in to increase access to hikers and bikers. But at 26 feet long, Caney's Crossing is one of the largest, and it's been a pretty epic bridge build. We're hoping to finish it today.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of what goes into building a bridge on the Spring Creek Nature Trail. Quite involved. Thanks to our volunteers. It's a great way to get out and get involved. A lot of what you'll see on the trail, there's lots of different flora and fauna. I mentioned migratory birds a lot. It's common to see things like the Canadian geese visiting. I mentioned the large great white pelicans that come through. You see birds like the white ibis quite frequently in the shallow areas, and different types of these are snowy egrets, smaller, not as large as the great egrets. Lots of different duck species. These are mallard ducks. Early one fall morning. This is a little blue heron. Little blue herons, they'll start out white like this, and then they'll turn this brilliant blue color later in the year. So it's really interesting to kind of see how things change over time, and really great opportunities if you're really into bird photography and bird watching to get out and see lots of different species out there. Small species, different types of garden spiders, and so there's always something that you can kind of go find out there on the trail if you kind of just pay attention. So we also have, there's one section of the trail kind of halfway between where the lakes are and the beaver pond. There's a very large leafcutter ant colony, and that's, if you come across a large clumps of sand, that's the colony, and these are pretty large. I mean, typically, their nest may reach a depth of 20 feet. They may have over 1,000 entrance holes. They can occupy up to a 4,500 square foot area. They can strip a tree of foliage within 24 hours if they want to, and but they're a critical part of the ecosystem, and they're very interesting to watch as they kind of take these little pieces of the leaves and move them into their nests. They basically they construct these nests, and they pull in the vegetation to feed a fungus that they cultivate and use as their main food source. See lots of different native vegetation. This is a beautyberry. These are, if you're ever out there and you forget your bug spray, take some leaves and rub them on your arms that are exposed, and that's a natural insect repellent. Some people make jam out of the bright lavender colored berries as well, although they're not nearly as sweet as a blackberry fruit. See, this is a purple mist flower with honeybees. Lots of different woodpecker species, red-bellied woodpeckers, downy woodpeckers. You might see pileated woodpeckers. The iconic redhead. So definitely when you're out walking around, you see stands of any dead trees. Pay attention. A lot of these woodpecker species like those types of areas. Lots of different fungi out there that grow on different trees and things. So you always see kinds of interesting little things that are attaching, come up with different interesting patterns. Really when you're out there looking at this, is fungi are really important to the ecosystems. They recycle the nutrients, but they also help transfer nutrients between trees. And there's just so much being uncovered right now about how much benefit they provide to our ecosystems. I think they're just really beginning to touch the surface of how valuable they are, and their interesting capabilities and how they help different forests grow and recover and so forth. Some examples of different types of fungi, all kinds of different patterns. And we've had some spottings of bald eagles out there on the lakes on the western end. So in fact, I took this picture last May when I went out there, and there was a pair in this tree. And then the next day there was this one, but they were out there in the tree, and they would fly over the water and and so forth. And so it's really quite exciting. I think in the Houston region, we've seen just a tremendous uptick in the bald eagle populations. I know in the Woodlands, I've seen really quite a few more great horned owls and hawks than I have several years ago. And so those are all really important to our ecosystem and kind of help bring balance. This is an example. I took a brief video of the eagle in the tree there. You can kind of see the branches swaying and so, I'd like to leave you with just a couple things, what you can do. So supporting land conservation efforts are really important. These are organizations that are really on the front lines of helping to preserve these areas. They work with the private landowners, the public landowners, your local governments, your county governments. They really seek to try to provide ample opportunity for people to get outdoors, be able to have access to these areas. You can volunteer with them. You can get involved in efforts like the township sponsors every year around Earth Day to help clean up trash. We find that's really important because every plastic bag or bottle or other type of debris that you pick up is one less item we find in our waterways and our natural areas. And we just need to remember that all drains that we see on the street do lead to the ocean. So anything you can do even in your neighborhood, if you're walking down the street and you see someone's just thrown a plastic bottle on the side of the street, when we get these heavy rains, it's going to find its way into the storm drain and it's going to find its way into the natural areas. The other thing is just take a lot of consideration to how you do your own landscaping. Look for organic methods. There's lots of great places around the area. I personally like to use Nature's Way. There's other ones as well. There's companies that do a lot of really good composting services, but switching to organic products and getting away from chemical-based products for your fertilization and your landscaping use can really have a tremendous difference on not only how your landscape is going to look, but it's going to do wonders for helping the natural area as well. Just not so many chemicals and issues with runoff of nitrogen, which causes algae problems and other problems in our natural waterways. So. With that, I'd just like to, thank you all for attending the presentation. Be glad to stick around for as long as I need to answer any questions or talk. If you want to see some more of the pictures I have on my project page on my website, you can just visit billbassphoto.com. You can see my Spring Creek Greenway project and Nature Trail project. I've got some galleries there of where I've done different photography around the Texas Gulf Coast area. You can always just send me a message through there under the connect menu. There's a way to send me a message if you want to just reach out to me later and have any questions. I'm typically, post on, Twitter and Instagram quite a bit, pictures. So if you're on social media, follow me. I don't do an email newsletter, but if I got enough people that wanted something in an email newsletter, I'd probably consider putting one together. So if you like getting your information through email and you don't really like messing with social media, drop me a note and let me know. I'd be glad to think about starting a newsletter, maybe quarterly or something, just to share some of the new things I've been working on and what I've been finding out there or news from the area. So I'm always glad to hear from people and so forth. But thank you very much. I'll just leave you with a couple of quotes that I've always liked, just about trying to protect what we have before it's gone, I really hope that you have a chance to get out there on the Spring Creek Nature Trail and experience it, enjoy it with your friends and family, or just maybe take a walk by yourself one day. It's a really we are getting into the summer months. It gets hot, but the fall, the winter, and the spring are wonderful times to be out there as well, and especially in the spring when the migratory birds start to come through. In those March, April, May timeframes, it's a really great time to be out there on the trail to see all the different species that come through this area. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions and go from there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bill. This is a great presentation. I'll share just some of my thoughts. Your photography is phenomenal. I just really wondered how you got some of those very close-up shots with birds. In particular in wildlife, they were really impressive. The two videos also, the hunter, what did you call that? The hunting cam?
Game cam, right.
Game cam, that's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
As well as the bridge construction video. I thought both of those well augmented your photographs. The first question I have received, and by the way, the next few minutes, go ahead and send any chat questions to me and I'll relay them on to Bill. But Kathy Herrick, our board secretary, wanted to know if you could show on the Spring Creek Nature Trail map where Beaver Pond is located. Is it possible
Sure.
for you to pull that back up?
Yeah, let me go, I'll go pull that up here. So go back and find the map and I'll share my screen again. Let's see here. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna turn on the annotation here and draw on the map. Okay, so this is Kirkendall Road right here that comes down, goes across Spring Creek Bridge. Bob's Boardwalk, the Beaver Pond, the loop. If you're walking this way, if you don't take a left, you'll end up going around the loop over the REI Bridge, and you'll go around the loop and you'll come back to Bob's Boardwalk. And inside that red area is the Beaver Pond, pretty much. So it's about, if you were to go from the parking lot here where the star is and kind of take this back way, which is, you know, perfectly fine to do. You'll see a lot of people that make that way. It's about a 2-mile walk to there. So it's a long walk. It's a 4-mile round trip roughly. But it's not technical. It's, you know, if you've got just, you know, some good trail shoes or comfortable walking shoes, I would recommend after a super heavy rain doing it because, it could be quite muddy. But if you have, you know, good hiking boots or anything, or if you want to ride your bike, from here, it's a pretty easy jaunt to this trail. And then you have a little, you know, maybe just a 1/4 mile walk around the Beaver Pond if you want to go around the whole thing. So, so that's where that is.
Follow-up question on that from me. My family's at Burroughs Park quite a bit. Is how do I connect to the trail from Burroughs?
Yeah, so Burroughs, I think, is over in this area on the far left, almost off the map, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so this trail, this extension they did runs through the forest and should connect into the park. And you should see some signage for the Spring Creek Nature Trail. Typically, the nature trail, if you don't see those posts, those signposts, like I mentioned, like something like this, if you don't see those, typically look for the blue blazon spray painted on trees. That was our temporary markers before we were able to get the permanent signpost in place, and we still use those just to try to help keep people guided. But if you have trouble finding where to get into the trail from the Burroughs Park, you know, maybe one day go over to the parking lot and walk backwards and go the other way and see where you come out. So,
gotcha. Yeah, we'll check that out. We're at Burroughs
Yeah.
quite often. And I'm really pleased that the nature trail tied from Burroughs and then all the way to Humble, because there's just some great spots along the way. So I was glad to see that connection.
yeah, we've gotten a lot of great feedback on the Burroughs Park connector. A lot of people have been really happy that that's been put in, and we were glad to do it. And it's a beautiful little section of trail. You go through one little area where you go across this long boardwalk and you kind of go across a little wooded creek area. It's really pretty. So
You might mention, we've had several that have joined the Zoom after you gave a description of how to get your hands on this trail map. Bill, do you want to go to that just one more time?
Yeah, if you look there, if you go to BayouLandConservancy.org, their website, you can find the trail. You can find the trail map there. They have just on one of their menus, search for the on their homepage, look for the Spring Creek. Usually it's under like lands we protect, and look for the Spring Creek Nature Trail. And there's a PDF version of the map you can download there. So
excellent.
Yeah.
All right, here comes a question from Molly Field Stout. Does the Spring Creek Nature Trail connect the Spring Creek Greenway that goes by Dennis Johnston Park?
Right. So the Spring Creek Nature Trail, I believe you're referring to probably the paved trails on the Harris County side that run along Spring Creek and go on the other side of 45.
Yes.
Yeah. No, this is a completely independent trail.
Okay.
And it's intended for that reason. In fact, we don't want them to kind of interact. We want the kind of the trail to be kind of a natural trail. And so there's some areas where they might get a little close, because I know over by the Creekside Park area, on the western area, Harris County is starting to put in some of their paths there. So there may be some areas where the paved areas start to get close to the trail, but we don't really connect them in. And where the trail ends on the Montgomery County Preserve side, all that land from that star on the eastern corner you see there, all the way over to 45, that's all privately owned land. So we don't really have a way to kind of extend the trail beyond that right now. So
where the bridge is closed, what's the end there? What's the end point?
yeah, so the end point is right here. That's the Montgomery County Preserve trailhead, and that's on Booty Road.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
and
Okay.
that
now
bridge
I
is
see it.
about right there, and it goes across Panther Branch. It's basically a bridge. It goes across Panther Branch,
Yeah.
which then joins into Spring Creek. And that, you know, we had that bridge during the construction phase, but then it's a privately owned bridge, and we've been looking for options to try to reroute the trail, you know, even do like a rough crossing across Panther Branch, and we just really haven't been able to come up with a solution yet on being able to find a way to get around that. And so
Just as an observation, this has been very informative because I thought they were one and the same. I thought that the path that you're talking about, the nature trail path that was not paved yet, was all part of the overall plan for the Spring Creek Greenway.
yeah.
And that one magic day they would all connect. So this has been very helpful to find out that no, they're actually two separate places. So very
yeah.
helpful.
Right now, and because this land right here, you know, this is all land that's all privately owned right here. There really isn't any plans to do anything beyond here.
Okay.
And so, you know, there are areas around here where the trail will come close to those paved trails systems.
Right.
But it's not really, you know, there's not really a plan to directly connect them.
Okay. Well,
So,
I
yeah.
get it now. I just didn't
Yeah.
realize that it was two separate things, two separate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That,
That's
you know,
nice. One is totally natural and the other one
Right.
does have the paving. So
yeah, and that's kind of the intention of it. You know,
Right.
it was, you know, one, because this trail, you know, you know, after you have these big floods that we have, large sections of the trail will be underwater. You know,
Right.
and we put a lot of things in there, like some special honeycomb layers that kind of help, so that, you know, when the water subsides, with the ground is still wet, if people are riding their bikes, they're not creating ruts or anything like that. So we've done some kind of man-made infrastructure stuff, but it's not anything like concrete. And you know, and for a lot of reasons, because, you know, we didn't directly follow the trail right on like the edge of the floodplains. You know, a lot of times the trail is kind of back off the floodplain boundary a little bit, but, you know, with these torrential rains we get, we kind of, you know, do get quite a bit of inundation in those areas. So
yeah, I'm sure.
yeah.
Thank you. This is very, very, very informative.
Yeah,
Beautiful pictures.
good.
Beautiful.
I agree. Good questions. And I appreciate that dialogue from both of you on that, because I also had the viewpoint that this was contiguous. I well understood from past years and green lectures from Bayou Land Conservancy that they were acquiring land, but I also viewed it was like a continuous, but you've got, obviously we've got the private land holdings along the way.
Yeah, the nature trail itself is contiguous. So it's, you know, with the exception of that issue with the bridge, it is all contiguous, where, you know, it's going across land that's owned either by Harris County or Montgomery County or Hughes Development. But it's, you know, so that the nature trail in and of itself is contiguous, but it's just not really a part of that paved trail system that you see on the Harris County side. So.
Got it. So I don't know if anybody besides me was trying to figure out the Burroughs Park connection, but another green member, Steve Ellison, shared a chat comment about that. He said, walk north from the lakes along the extreme eastern edge of Burroughs Park. It is not especially well marked, but you'll see a blue blaze, and the small SCNT breaks off to the east about a quarter-mile north of the lakes. Spring Creek Nature Trail, I should say, breaks off to the east about a quarter-mile north of the lakes. So that's probably one other good description of how to get it from Burroughs I'll be
Right.
checking that out. Like I said, my family's over there several times a month.
Yeah. Okay, great.
All right, anybody else to chat or comments? That's all I've got.
I saw a
from-
question there on invasive species. I can kind of touch on that a little bit. So yeah, our trail crew, tallow is everywhere, as everybody knows. So, and our trail crew goes out and they, we've removed some big stands of tallow, and especially along that. If you take that Burroughs Park extension and you're coming from the parking lot and you go across that really large boardwalk that kind of goes across this green area, we removed a lot of tallow tree from in there. So that's always just an ongoing thing that we do, looking to remove some of those invasive species like that. Some of the other things we have are, you've got the thorny, the orange, trifoliate orange, right? There's some really large stands of that back over. Actually, if you want to know what that looks like, if you take this walk around right, I believe about right. If you start here and you walk around the thing, you go around the lakes, around right that area right there on this side, you'll see these little yellow oranges. They look like oranges, but they're not really. They got too many seeds in them to eat them. But there's back in there. There's just a massive stand of trifoliate orange. It would take a bulldozer to get it out, and it's not something you want to try to go in there because you'd end up with holes all over your body because the thorns on them are just really incredible. I mean, they're inch long, if not longer, and they're not to be played with. So, but yeah, invasives are a problem. I mean, plant invasives are a problem in our region. Animal invasives, are a problem. In fact, I was at the Shadow Bend YMCA. I think it was about maybe 3 years ago, and we found a Cuban tree frog right by the pool, and that was the first photographed documented case of a Cuban tree frog in Texas. And if you know anything about the Cuban tree frogs, they're all over Florida, and they've kind of slowly made their way west. And so I kind of got into USGS databases having the first photo documented Cuban tree frog photo in Texas. And then there's a real kind of a grayish, pale frog. They look a lot like our green tree frogs. And that's the problem, is that, we all know our little green tree frogs that we know in the woodlands, and, but they're louder and they can really come in and overtake more native species. So invasives are a real problem.
So I would just add to that, we have an invasive task force that works weekly. It's headed up by Kathy Herrick, and the tree tallows in Shadow Lake Marsh area has been some recent projects, but air potatoes have been a good 3 years, especially along trails, original village of Grogan's Mill. You can really tell how much the air potatoes have taken over the vines. So I was curious, air potatoes, I didn't hear you mention that, Bill. Have you found any massive areas of problems with your trails?
When I don't want to say like massive problem. I mean, we come across areas where we see, okay, we're going to go out there and remove some vine or whatever. And that's the real thing, the trail crew gets involved in. Like I said, they're out there. In that video, Dean Caney was talking about the geezer squad, right? that's those guys out there. They're out there in the heat, and they're out there every Peter Jensen, he was in that video.
Yeah, I recognize it.
Yeah, there they all are. They're out there every Wednesday. I try to go out there and work with them. They have quote unquote book club after they work, which I've never seen a book, but I've seen some beer. So I don't know what that quite means. But yeah, they're out there every Wednesday. If they know that, hey, we're gonna go take out some tallow this Wednesday, or we're gonna whatever it is, if they see a need for it, they're out there removing it. So
well, Kathy Herrick has just chatted. Task Force has permission both with Bayou Land Conservancy and the township to work on any of the invasives along the trail. An attack climbing fern along the nature trail, I should say, was her comment. We've got another chat question from
Sure.
Paul Babcock. Any update on the Exxon opening to their trail access?
No, no. We don't have anything with that.
Yeah, I've heard that question before, so I guess stay tuned on that one.
Yeah, we haven't. Yeah, we kind of, for this project, that was kind of the extent of the trail, and we haven't really put any plans together for extending it or trying to go beyond there right now. So.
Anybody else with questions? That's about all I have on my list. I think the others might have gone to you, Bill. Do you see anything else?
Let me go
On
look
your
and
chat?
see. I don't. Let's see here. No, the only thing I see was the invasive species question. That was the only one I got sent directly to me. So.
Sounds good. Well,
Yeah.
I'll just add a couple quick comments on that invasive species. We will be having some more work sessions coming up in future weeks. Kathy here updates us all. If you have any interest in joining the task force, it's either weekends or even weekdays, 2 hours of your time to help on air potatoes and tallows. And climbing fern, as I understand it, in the Spring Creek Nature Trail. We will work on that. So just send info@thewoodlandsgreen.org. Show you've got interest to be added to a volunteer. I'm one of the new volunteers with that, but Kathy's been coordinating for over 3 years now. So stay tuned on that and let us know if you'd like to volunteer. Our next Going Green lecture is coming up in about 10 days. Rarely do we have them on other days than Thursdays. However, our annual meeting is the first Monday in June, and this year we will have both annual meeting wrapping up the year as well as a lecture on climate simulation tool by Roger Ingersoll. Roger was with us a short time. I don't think he is now, but he will be giving a demonstration, and people that have sat in on this simulation tool have been so impressed. So I have not, and I'm anxious to learn more about that. To go to the annual meeting, 7 p.m. on Zoom on June the 7th, just go to our website. And that's all I have. Anybody else? Many thanks to Bill. This was so informative.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and if y'all want to, if you want to stay informed of what's going on out there with Bayou Land Conservancy and their efforts, sign up for the newsletter on their website. If you're interested in getting out there and being a part of the trail crew or going through the ambassador program, we recommend the ambassador program before you get involved in the trail crew, because you'll learn a lot about what the trail crew does and how they do it. We had I think a record number of people attending the ambassador program this year. People are they're ready to get back outdoors and do things. So definitely check out VLC's website on that. If anybody has any questions, feel free to send me a message to my website. I don't respond to direct messages on social media much, mostly just through website. I'll just email you back. But appreciate the opportunity again to share this, and hope everybody gives it a shot. If you haven't been out there yet, try it, enjoy it, and it's there for everybody.
Thanks so much, Bill. Appreciate you.
Thank you. All right.
Good night.
Good night.